In this video, we are going to keep comparing fractions, and we'll be using the strategy of creating a common denominator. So here I have two fraction amounts, 2/3 and 7/12. They do not have the same denominator, they don't have the same numerator, and they are both over the half. So it's hard to tell which one is bigger. It's okay to go ahead and predict or have a guess, but we want to create a common denominator so that we can be absolutely sure which fraction is bigger. When I look at the denominators, I know that 3 times 4 equals 12. So I'm going to make an equivalent fraction to 2/3. Three times 4 equals 12. So we'll go ahead and multiply by 4/4. That will get us the common denominator of 12. Okay, so now we're comparing 8/12 to 7/12. And we know that 8 pieces are more than 7 pieces, so 8/12 is greater than 7/12. Or back to the original problem, 2/3 is greater than 7/12. As you can see with the fraction pieces, 2/3 really does equal 8/12. This is so helpful when we're comparing to have that common denominator. Let's look at these two fractions, 2/6 compared to 1/4. When I think about comparing the two amounts, I notice that the denominators are not the same, the numerators are not the same, and if I think about the benchmarks, they are both less than 1/2. So these are very close to one another. Let's look at our denominator and see if we can create a common denominator. Does 4 times anything equal 6? Sometimes when we're comparing two fractions, the denominators are not factors and multiples of each other. In the previous video and on the previous practice page, the fractions we were comparing were factors and multiples of each other, so it was really easy to find that common denominator. Sometimes though, the two fractions that we're comparing are not factors or multiples of each other. We can still find a common denominator. I just need to find a number that's a multiple of 6 and a multiple of 4. We'll make a list of the multiples of 6. So remember, multiple means multiplication. So the first multiple of 6 is 6 times 1. And then 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 3 is 18. 6 times 4 is 24. And 6 times 5 is 30. You can keep going, but usually I just find the first 3 or 4 multiples, and if we need to keep going further, we can. Now we'll find the first few multiples of 4. So we have 4. 4 times 2 is 8, and 4 times 3 is 12. I can actually stop right there because we've just found a common multiple. The reason we do that is because that means that 2/6 has an equivalent fraction with 12 as a denominator, and 1/4 has an equivalent fraction with 12 as a denominator. So we can change the names of these fraction amounts. They'll have a common denominator of 12, and if they have the same denominator, then they become very easy to compare. This is like what we did earlier. We'll just take 2/6 and times it by something equal to 1 whole, obviously. It has to have 12 as a denominator. 2/6 times 2 halves will give us 4/12. And then over here, we'll go ahead and take 1/4 and multiply it by something and end up with a new fraction name that has 12 as a denominator. So 4 times 3 equals 12. So we have 3/12. What we just did then is we created equivalent fractions. So now it's like I'm comparing 4/12 to 3/12. Once we have that common denominator, comparing the fractions is no problem. 4/12 is greater than 3/12. Let's take a look at what we just did with our fraction pieces. So in the beginning, we had 2/6 compared to 1/4. By listing the multiples, we were able to find a common denominator of 12. So we found that 2/6 is equivalent to 4/12. We found that 1/4 is equivalent to 3/12. That makes these fraction amounts really easy to compare when we've changed it to 12ths, because we know that 4 pieces is greater than 3 pieces.